Hello everyone! So I purpled Alisaie. If you want to know what this red mage does and what she offers to a team, stick around and find out. Alisaie is a single target oriented magic attacker who is one of the few characters with a prominent rotation in this game, giving her a sense of flow that defines her gameplay. The first thing to point out is Alisaie has a unique effect as part of her kit naturally, her mana counter. All her skill 1 variations increase white mana, all her skill 2 variations increase black mana, her basic brave attack raises both by 1, and her enchanted HP attacks reduce both by a certain amount. Having at least 1 white mana grants her brave regen, while at least 1 black mana raises her attack. Another core part of her kit is her dual cast ability, a frame buff given by Ver Fire and Ver Stone that gives her a free skill cast on next turn. This buff can be extended, which can lead to quite the shenanigans. But moving into her moveset, we have her normal skill 1 chain is Ver Arrow and Ver Stone. Both skills raise Alisaie's brave based on her attack, do 5 hits, have base 120% overflow, and raise her white mana. Arrow has high turn rate, while Stone does not increase turn count. Both skills are also properly their elements, Wind for Arrow and Earth for Stone. Her normal skill 2 chain is Ver Thunder and Ver Fire. Both skills also do 5 hits, and trade having overflow for having splash damage, 50% in fact. Both skills raise her black mana, and like her skill 1 chain, Thunder the first variant has high turn rate, while Fire the second variant does not increase turn count. Both skills are also properly their elements, Thunder and Fire. Alisaie gets access to 2 enhanced HP attacks depending on where her mana counter is at. If both are between 1 and 5, she gets Enchanted Riposte, 3 single target hits with an HP hit that reduces both mana counters by 1. However, if both counters are at least 5, she instead gets Enchanted Redoublement, which deals 8 single target hits with an HP hit, grants Alisaie a generic 30% max bravery buff, and until her next cast, replaces her skill 1 with Ver Holy and skill 2 with Ver Flare. Both skills are further enhanced versions of their skill chains. Ver Holy has higher brave gain based on attack and higher base overflow, while Ver Flare has overflow in the first place, and both variants have 6 hits instead of 5. Whichever one you use will revert that skill chain back to its dual cast variant, and the other skill chain will go back to whatever it was before you use Enchanted Redoublement. Her EX is Jolt 2 Combo. At base, a 3-hit HP attack that does not add to turn count, has instant turn rate, will extend dual cast duration by 1, effectively preserving it, will add 2 to both mana counters, and grants Alisaie Duelist, a frame buff that raises attack and speed. Realization gives Alisaie a boost to both her rotation and her damage, and at 3 ingots, her EX becomes a large part of her damage output. Realization improves the EX cast from a 3-hit HP attack into a 2-hit HP attack done 3 times, doubling the hits and making it a very efficient brave dump. It also inflicts a framed in peril of her 4 elements, Thunder, Wind, Fire, and Earth, onto all enemies. She also gets brave and HP plus variants, but you're likely not going to be using the HP plus anyways. 1 ingot is 40% attack and 80% max bravery, which is very useful since Ali will be hitting for higher damage just about all the time thanks to her imperil, so having more max bravery means less leakage. 2 ingots gives her starting EX gauge, but also starts off her moves as the dual cast variants, similar to how Trey's 2 ingot boost works. This means that you can open immediately with the EX for the imperil, and then start off however you want her skill rotation to go after that. 3 ingots further improves the EX cast, giving 1 more hit to each part of the cast, as well as giving her 20% brave return from the first and second HP attacks, as well as just getting stronger overall. It also adds 30% overflow to her Duelist buff, giving her more headroom when doing attacks. If you play or hear discussion about games like Dota and League of Legends, then you possibly come across the term skill expression. When I see the rotations Alisaie can go through, that's a term that comes to mind. From what I understand, they did a decent job with what they could putting in the Final Fantasy XIV Red Mage gameplay into Alisaie's kit, and her EX was one of the few that I told myself months ago with her Lost Chapter that I wanted because it looked cool. While she doesn't have that many hits in her magic spells, the amount of free turns, actions, and skills she gets makes that hardly an issue, coupled with her self-imperil of her elements and her lack of buffs, meaning she's not too hard to work into a party. The hardest thing with her is that similar to turn-stealing characters like Lightning and Aranea, buffs of all durations are naturally going to be a bit harder to keep on her, so aura characters such as Paladin Cecil and Charlotta work great with her, Charlotta especially since her EX has 3 HP hits. In terms of comparing her to anyone, the quickest comparison you can make is her bannermate Enchanted. Both of them imperil the elements of their skills, Shantato in fact imperils all elements, are primarily single target damage, have higher than normal turn rate with some moves, and have EXs that are up fairly often and compromise a fair amount of their damage. However, I don't think that's actually a fair one-to-one comparison, as Shantato has an LD. To make up for that, let's also look at Lightning. Both she and Alisaie self-imperil, have free skills and free turns, and have EXs that make up a large part of their damage in a fight. Lightning can get past resistances, but if she can't imperil, she's largely out of the fight, which doesn't affect Alisaie quite as bad. However, Lightning handles her speed differently, being more predictable and abusable compared to Alisaie's. Lightning also benefits greatly from, but doesn't supremely rely on, her skills, and has solid basic attacks. Whereas if you want absolute longevity, Alisaie may not want to use enchanted redoublement at all. Am I calling Alisaie a magic-based version of Lightning? In terms of her core gameplay of a skill rotation that relies heavily on free skills and EX casts, yes, but nothing at all in terms of turn delay and enemy control. Alisaie, I'd say, requires more focus to play properly, whereas Lightning is a bit more beginner-friendly in comparison and has less costly mistakes. Alisaie has yet to receive an LD, so here's my thoughts on what she could get. The most obvious thing is that she needs an enchant. 5 out of her 6 verse spells have elements, and neither enchanted redoublement, which technically is stronger than all of her base spells by the way, nor her EX have an element attached to them, meaning while she can bypass resistances with her spells, she can't do it with those moves, which can definitely put a dent into how much damage she's going to be putting out. Whether they add it into Duelist or give her another frame buff is their choice, but considering that she's still run it down pretty fast even if it were like a 12 action long buff, it'd make more sense to just add it into Duelist. Besides that, an unfortunate part of her kit is that she can't go into Verholy and Verflare without using enchanted redoublement, and that's a choice you have to make intentionally for essentially disrupting her flow, and there's no sensible way to preserve dual cast for it without having an extender in the party. Maybe that's the point, and that's how Red Mage works in 14, I wouldn't know, but it'd be nice to try and work it in. Maybe let the LD passive have enchanted redoublement extend dual cast so you can get a free cast of Holy or Flare, I don't know. Speaking of dual cast, I would just like to talk about that really fast. Dual cast, as mentioned earlier, is given by Verstone and Verfire, and only those spells. A property of Alisaie's EX cast is it extends the duration of dual cast, and only dual cast, by 1 turn, meaning you're always safe to use EX if you have it on. Having 1 turn duration dual cast gives you a fair bit of skill longevity, but it can get better. If you use any buff extender, Aiko, Yuna, Saz, or Hope, you can have her dual cast last 2 turns, or more, potentially, but it can mess up the rotation a bit, which means she can rotate through both variations of either skill chain as long as you choose to keep properly reapplying and extending the dual cast buff. Running a team like this means Alisaie has drastically increased longevity even if you choose to switch her skill chain a few times, but you will lower her damage output in the same amount of time just a bit because enchanted redoublement and her third variations of both skills are her strongest moves outside of her EX. In my opinion, Alisaie functions best with a buff extender because ironically, it makes her simpler to play but also gives her incredible longevity, at the expense of potentially burning out your buff extender faster. At the very least, that means you still have 1 character slot for either more damage or an offensive support unit. So yeah, that's Purple Alisaie. For being an EX plus only unit in the burst era, she can pull her weight. However, as I mentioned, she does not self-enchant, so in magic resistant fights her damage is heavily weighted towards whichever skill she can properly use, which is its own issue if she can't properly imperil all 4 of them. She's very fun to use and is probably the most dynamic character I've put time into in this game, so while she's not a meta pick, she's a very enjoyable one if you're looking for a different type of character to play around and mess with. She comes around again when Act 3 of the story begins. However, she only gets her level 80 awakening, so at that point, she's not really worth consideration if you're looking for Lufenia usable units. She is absolutely a character that I would describe as, if you want to use her while she's still relevant, you want her now. But otherwise, I feel she'll come back and be very solidly usable once she gets her LD since her hit counts and turn efficiency are already pretty good, and being able to do more damage would solve higher difficulty problems she may have. If you enjoyed this breakdown and discussion of Alisaie's mildly complex kit and want to see more content like it, be sure to stick around and subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again.